All right, let's set the scene for one of the absolute most suspenseful and, frankly, unbelievable encounters of the entire Jacobite risings. Picture this. The year is 1746. We're up in the freezing, absolutely unforgiving Highlands of Scotland, and the entire course of history is about to be completely derailed by a handful of locals in the dead of night.
I want you to really keep this practically impossible question in mind as we trace the chilling events of this story. Seriously, how do 11 guys beat 1,500? It sounds like a total myth, right? Or maybe some wild exaggeration from a Hollywood movie. But no, this is a very real, highly documented military event known as the Rout of Moy. And to understand how a staggering upset like this actually went down, we need to look at exactly who was where and why the stakes were just so incredibly high. So let's look at the chain of events that got us here. After their victory at the Battle of Falkirk, the Jacobite army held a war council in Crieff. Now, against the direct wishes of Charles Edward Stuart, the prince himself, they decided to retreat north to set up a base at Inverness. So the army splits up to march. But the crucial, terrifying outcome of this maneuver, Charles ends up completely separated from his main army. By February 16th, he arrives just south of Inverness at a place called Moy Hall, and he is entirely exposed.
Now, the really crucial point here is the staggering vulnerability of the prince in this exact moment. It is literally a David versus Goliath scenario just waiting to snap shut. On one hand, you have Charles Stuart settling into his lodgings with only a handful of followers. I mean, they did have some lookouts posted forward, but still. And then, just 8 miles away in Inverness, you have Major General John Campbell, the Earl of Loudon, and he is sitting on a massive force of around 2,000 government Highlanders. As soon as Loudon hears the prince is practically next door, he knows this is it. He has the chance to end the entire rebellion in a single night.
But to fully grasp the sheer drama of this night, we have to look at who was actually hosting the prince at Moy Hall. You honestly couldn't write a better script for the deeply divided loyalties of the time. Moy Hall is the home of Lady Anne Mackintosh. She is fiercely pro-Jacobite. But her husband, Clan Chief Angus Mackintosh, he's literally a captain in the Black Watch, actively serving the opposing government army. So Charles is putting his life entirely in the hands of Lady Mackintosh, while her husband is out there fighting for the very forces trying to capture him.
As night falls, a terrifying countdown begins. At 8 p.m., Loudon gathers his officers. His order? Prep for a massive surprise attack by 11 p.m. But, you really can't prep an entire army in total secret. By 9 p.m., word leaks to Lady Mackintosh that there's a huge motion among the garrison. Knowing a trap is being set, she instantly deploys her own watchers along the Inverness Road. And one of those watchers is a local blacksmith named Donald Fraser. He's sent out into the freezing dark with a party of just 10 men.
Okay, imagine the sheer sensory nightmare that's about to unfold here. It's midnight. The Earl of Loudon marches out of Inverness with 1,500 heavily armed men, and they are walking straight into a howling, blinding, chaotic blizzard. Think about the biting cold, the snow whipping in their faces, the absolute silence of the night masking this massive, creeping threat, aiming to capture the prince by daybreak. Loudon even sends 30 men ahead with strict orders to stop anyone on the road, just to ensure absolute, deadly silence.
But the surprise is already ruined. In the early hours of the morning, desperate messages finally reach Moy Hall confirming that Loudon is on the march. The trap is closing, and it's closing fast. Lady Mackintosh wakes the prince, and he and his followers literally have to flee their beds, vanishing straight into the freezing woods north of Loch Moy just to hide. A second message arrives, saying Loudon is about to cross the river and will be there before daylight. The prince is gone, but Loudon's massive army is still marching relentlessly through the snow toward Moy Hall. And the only thing standing in their way is a local blacksmith.
So this massive government force is closing in, but standing in their way isn't some opposing army. It's just a single shocking number. 11. Donald Fraser, the blacksmith, and his 10 men. 11 guys in total. They are the absolute only defense against an advancing army of 1,500 battle-hardened troops. Out in the freezing dark, they can hear the government Highlanders approaching the heights above the River Nair.
Now, Fraser knows he can't fight them toe-to-toe. That'd be suicide. So he doesn't. Instead, he uses the sheer chaos of the blizzard and the terrifying pitch-black darkness to engineer a brilliant psychological break. He orders his 10 men to spread out incredibly widely along the roadside. When the massive column of government troops gets close enough, Fraser's men start firing their muskets blindly from the shadows. But here's the genius part. They start screaming the blood-curdling war cries of multiple different Jacobite clans into the swirling snow.
They create this absolute illusion that a massive, sprawling Jacobite army is waiting for them in the dark. It is a literal masterclass in asymmetrical psychological warfare.
And it completely works. The sheer panic is so palpable in Loudon's own mortified reports later on. He admitted that his vanguard saw, or, imagined they saw, just a few men in the snow, but the psychological break was instant. The sudden, deafening ambush in a blinding blizzard, combined with phantom war cries echoing from everywhere at once, it completely collapsed his front lines. It results in just total, terrifying chaos. Loudon's men are pressed 10 deep on this narrow road. In absolute panic, they turn to face where they saw the musket fire and just start blindly shooting into the blizzard. The friendly fire is devastating. In fact, the only casualty of this entire crazy encounter comes from the government side. Duncan Bam McCrimmon, who was the hereditary piper to the MacLeods, is accidentally shot and killed right at his own commander's feet. Loudon literally reports having to run up and stand directly in front of the muzzles of his own terrified men just to stop them from shooting each other in the pitch black. And the illusion is so complete and the terror is so incredibly contagious that it ripples all the way to the back of the marching column. The rear 5 companies, which, by the way, makes up a full 1/3 of Loudon's entire force, simply break and run. The Mackenzies flee entirely without their officers. The commander of the company behind them, who's described as being very short-sighted, assumes they must be following orders and leads his own company to follow them in retreat. It's a complete domino effect. Loudon sits out there in the freezing dark for an hour trying to restore order, but the panic is absolute. He is forced to abandon the entire mission and withdraw. The aftermath of this incredible bluff is just staggering. For literally saving the prince's life and routing an entire army with just 10 guys, Donald Fraser is rewarded with guineas and a captain's commission. Meanwhile, the consequences for the government are a disaster. Loudon retreats all the way back to Inverness, holds a council of war, realizes his men are entirely spooked and he can't hold the town, and completely abandons Inverness to the Jacobites, ferrying his troops away to the Black Isle. This incredible victory was won entirely through wits and weather. It proves for sure that surprise is sometimes far deadlier than 1,000 muskets. And as a super fascinating epilogue to all this high-stakes military drama, we get this delightful historical irony playing out. Remember Lady Anne's husband, the government soldier? Well, a month later in March, the Jacobites actually capture him. The prince decides to parole him directly into the custody of his own rebel wife. When he arrives, Lady Mackintosh greets him simply with, "Your servant, Captain," to which her captive husband replies, "Your servant, Colonel." And that right there is exactly how she cemented her famous nickname in history, Colonel Anne. And honestly, Colonel Anne remained totally unbowed, proving she always got the last laugh. Even after the Jacobite forces were definitively defeated later that year at Culloden, she was taken into custody in London. But when she was released, the victorious Duke of Cumberland invited her to a ball and asked her to dance to a pro-government tune. She agreed, but only on the condition that he then dance to a tune of her choice. He accepted, and she boldly made the victorious Duke of Cumberland dance to the rebel tune, "The Old Stuart's Back Again." Just a total Bros move. So this whole explainer really leaves us with a provocative thought. What if Loudon's men had just kept their nerve? What if they hadn't been spooked by the ghosts of a midnight blizzard and the screams of a local blacksmith? The entire uprising would have ended right then and there. It's such a powerful reminder for us today. Sometimes the course of history isn't dictated by the biggest army or the best weapons, but suspended on nothing more than the weather, a clever bluff, and the absolute bravery of 11 men standing in the snow.